First Minister, how many children are waiting for more than 4 months for a first appointment with child and adolescent mental health services?
Well, with child and adolescent mental health service, we've invested heavily, 6.6 million into the service. Demand outstripped supply, that much is true, which is why, of course, we matched that with the extra investment that has been put in. It means, of course, that the numbers waiting and the times that that youngsters are waiting have gone down.
Well, First Minister, I asked you for a figure, and the exact number that you were looking for is 1,174 children are waiting for 4 months, and it's not true to say that that figure has gone down, because that figure has almost trebled in the 3 years since 2013. Now, we all know that investment in early years are crucial for positive outcomes in education and health, and in particular in preventing some of the problems that can arise later on in life. Developments in neuroscience are showing that the early teenage years can be just as crucial for a person's development as the early years. I visited my old school last Friday, and I was told that the rates of self-harm are going through the roof at Tonopandi Community College, and I don't think for 1 minute that that is an isolated case. Depression, anxiety and self-harm have become too common amongst a generation that have many worries about things like zero-hour contracts, massive student debt and endless austerity. Those young people are not covered by the interventions that are available for children under 7 years old. The things that can go wrong in the teenage years can cause problems for life, and I saw that only too well in my former role as a probation officer. First Minister, will you establish a programme for pre-teens and teenagers to go alongside your Healthy Child programme? And would you be prepared to look at what role mindfulness could play in such a programme?
Well, first of all, mindfulness was mentioned in the Welsh Level Manifesto as something that could be looked at. When we talk about the health of a child up to 7 years old, that must include all types of health, including mental health as well. And that is something that will be taken into consideration when developing the programme. The second point is this. She's right. I mean, we do see instances where young people do find themselves under a great deal of stress. Cyberbullying is one area particularly which she and I didn't have to cope with, which is something that is a real issue, and the education programme in schools to deal with that is important. The fact that there are counsellors in the secondary schools, that's important in order to help young people, and of course ultimately making sure the resources are there for CAMS. The resources have been put in. I fully expect the waiting times and the numbers to go down as those resources work through the system.
First Minister, your government's record in helping young people with poor mental health is appalling. And that's without mentioning the children and young people that don't even make it into the system. The mortality rate for teenagers between 15 and 19 years old is higher in Wales than it is in England. And there has been no reduction in deaths from intentional injury from that age group between 10 and 18 years old in 3 decades. A national case audit of children's deaths has suggested that many young people who died from suicide had not had any contact at all with mental health services. And for those who had, there were problems with services failing to follow up on patients who did not turn up for their first appointments. You once admitted, First Minister, that your government took its eye off the ball when it came to education. Will you now accept that your government has taken its eye off the ball on children and young people's mental health? Will you now accept that this is a crisis? And will you tell us what, after 17 years of leading the government here in Wales, you intend to do about this?
Well, I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, I had experience, as did my constituents, of this. When the town that I represent was branded as some kind of suicide capital, where we had predatory journalists arriving from London who were trying to question young people outside the local college and trying to suggest to them that it was better to be dead than to live in the area. Those are the exact words that we used. Those youngsters who took their lives, in the main, did not know each other, despite what the press suggested. And to come to the point that she was making, many of them had no contact with mental health services. They were a surprise. What happened was a surprise to their families. They'd had no warning, and in some ways, that's the greatest tragedy of all. Because people, it's an important point. this is the greatest tragedy of all, where you have young people who are not known to the system and have not identified themselves to the system. She asked what's being done. I've already mentioned the money that's been put into CAMS. It is true to say that demand for CAMS was significant, and that's why, of course, we provided more resources for CAMS in order to make sure that more young people are identified. And on top of that, of course, we do have counselling services in the secondary schools in order that young people can go and talk to people early on. And that takes us well beyond what used to be the case in Wales.
Cwestiwn